representation in these types of things. It also actually adds a bunch of enhancements to Plutus. So Plutus v3, which allows for BLS support. So that basically brings roll-ups and zero knowledge stuff and all kinds of really cool scalability things into the Cardano ecosystem. So this is the largest and most significant hard fork ever done. And it's the most meaningful because it basically builds a whole on-chain government. Turns on the Cardano treasury. There's almost $1 billion of value floating around there. And it basically turns on democratic consent and constitutional representation. So people will register DREPs just like they register stake pools, and they can delegate to them, and those DREPs can vote. And those DREPs and constitutional committee members basically control all the major governance actions, whether it be hard forks or treasury withdrawals or protocol parameter updates. It's the largest and most significant DAO ever built for our industry. So obviously this one's being closely watched by many people, and it's really exciting, but it's a little scary because
Sure.
there's no going back. It's like the domino effect. You've pushed the domino, and you just have to watch what happens afterwards. But we're all in good spirits about that. The other major thing is Basho, and there's kind of a multi-pronged scalability approach that we've been taking as an ecosystem. So we have Hydra, which is rapidly approaching version 1, and there's a lot of cool and interesting things that will be demoed at Rare Evo for that. And that's kind of our off-chain state channels play, which is usually very useful on a DApp by DApp basis. Then you also have things like Ouroboros Laos. We just published the paper for that, 6 years in the making. So it took a really long time to get there. But in our view, it solves a big chunk of the blockchain trilemma, where you get pretty much the fastest protocol you can get. It's called a 1 minus delta protocol. But you preserve that 50% Byzantine resistance, and actually you have a higher degree of decentralization than we currently do, which is best in class for consensus. So we're very proud of that. And now it's entering the prototyping phase. And then we have things like partner chains, for example, which take very high load applications off the Cardano network and into their own dedicated sidechain that basically can run in parallel with the system. And then, of course, all the enhancements we're making in the zero knowledge space and recursive space, thanks to Plutus v3 and Midnight. So very vibrant. And it's kind of an all of the above's scalability strategy, and a little bit of optimization, a little bit of new capabilities, some of the old things that you've all come to know and expect, like state channels and rollups, and some new things like Ouroboros Laos, which really innovate and bring a completely new way of looking at this stuff to the industry as a whole. So Basho is in deep development, and there's a lot of really cool things happening. You need Voltaire to get to Basho because there are certain decisions that have to be made about how to roll things out and where to break backwards compatibility. And that requires complex governance to be able to have that discussion and debate and eventually converge to it. You can't really do that in a more simplistic governance sense.
So I have a couple of follow-up questions there. With regards to governance, so let's say there's a new Cardano token holder, ADA token holder listening. Is there like a threshold? How would they be able to participate in some of these votes? If you could take us behind the scenes yet, or is it still too early to talk about that?
No, it's not too early. The design has been over a 2-year period. People have talked about it. And so the design is completely known and fully formalized. Yeah, so basically it's a representative democracy. And so we try to take the best elements of a republic. So you have constitutional representation and representatives, and combine that with liquid feedback, which is a concept the Pirate Party came up with about 20 years ago. So basically the idea is that there's two primary houses and kind of a fallback. And so the two houses are the DREPs and the Constitutional Committee. The DREPs, they register very much like a person registers a stake pool operator, and then you can delegate to them a vote. So you can be your own DREP and delegate to yourself, and that's how you participate directly in votes. Or you can delegate just like you do to a stake pool, somebody you like, or a coalition of people that you like, because you can delegate to multiple DREPs. So this allows political parties to form, and this allows special interest groups to form, and these types of things. And there are 7 different governance actions that can be brought before a DREP. Everything from withdrawing money from the Cardano treasury to initiating a hard fork to changing protocol parameter and everything in between. Now, each of these actions are defined in SIP 1694. So if you're curious, you can kind of look up the table and see that. Now, for more significant governance actions, you have to then involve the Constitutional Committee as well. So, for example, hard forking the system is very significant. So, there's an on-chain constitution. We wrote an interim constitution, and there's going to be a constitutional convention in Argentina at the end of the year to get the final constitution written with the community as a whole. And basically, that establishes some baseline invariance, like, hey, maybe there should only ever be 45 billion ADA because that was the social contract that people signed up for, these types of things. And then some operating variants that need to be put in to bootstrap the system. And basically, the Constitutional Committee's job is to look at governance actions from the perspective of the Constitution and ask, is this constitutional or not? For example, are they trying to print money out of thin air or these types of things? In some cases, you can algorithmically protect the system. So we actually have a smart contract that was written with 131 on-chain guardrails. So in many cases like that print money, you can stop that. And others are social consensus, which means that the Constitutional Committee can basically act as a stopgap. And for very significant things, the stake pool operators get involved as well. And so it's a tripartite model. So what's so cool about it is that we took some of the best ideas from traditional governments and some of these new ideas that come from the internet governance, and we try to put them together in a way that creates a really nice minimum viable government system. And you really judge the quality of your government by three parameters: efficacy, efficiency, and integrity. So efficacy is basically, are you making the right decisions or not? So you usually have some goal in mind, like, hey, I want to like reduce poverty or make homeless people get homes or something, or improve the GDP, and you can measure it. So did it happen or not? Efficiency is how quickly can you get to a decision. So does it take a year to get to yes? Like if you're voting on a budget, does it take 6 months to get a budget done or something like that? Or do you do it in a week or something like that? And integrity is, who do you leave behind in the process of making decisions? So high integrity systems take everybody along. Low integrity systems tend to only focus on a certain group, minority or majority, and benefit them and kind of throw the other people in society away. So just like there's a blockchain trilemma between scalability and decentralization and security, there is actually a governance trilemma where it's really hard to have all three properties in the same governing system.
Sure.
So China, for example, is fairly effective and fairly efficient. They make decisions very quickly, and also those decisions tend, in the long arc of things, to have built up their country into a superpower. On the other hand, a lot of decisions they made don't have a lot of integrity. You know, a lot of people get left behind, human rights are violated, these types of things. Switzerland is a high integrity and very effective government. When they make decisions, they tend to be the right decisions. And the Swiss have one of the freest, most decentralized societies and most representative societies in the world. However, it's highly inefficient. It takes like 10 years to build something in Zurich. You know, it's a very slow moving system. The Swiss, think in terms of decades and centuries, as do the Japanese. So, usually you get two if you're lucky. It's really hard to have a situation where you get all three. We tried to design as an ecosystem the governance system of Cardano in a way where we could try to solve that trilemma and be efficient, effective, and have high integrity. And you typically do this with institutions and constitutions. Your constitution is basically a memorandum on the integrity principles that you desire. And then your institutions are there to help take complex decisions and get them to a yes-no state so that they can be voted on quickly and so they can pass quickly after you've done the desk work and the prep work. So the strength of your institutions really does tell you if you can be efficient, effective, and have high integrity. And that's the great social experiment that we're conducting in Cardano land. So we have institutions like Intersect, the members-based organization. Anybody who holds ADA can join, and it's taking over a lot of these functions, like the product function and the budget functions and these types of things, which are very complicated. But there are other institutions like the Cardano Foundation and so forth, and they're there to basically lend support and aid as well. And so it's kind of a giant experiment, and we're the most significant blockchain to do something like this. It's a little scary at times because you have no idea how these pieces are actually going to come together in practice. But so far, every social signal we've seen has pointed towards a commitment, desire for the community to decentralize this as much as possible. For example, the first Constitutional Committee elections are being held for the interim Constitutional Committee responsible for turning this all on. We already have 17 candidates running for that constitutional committee to be voted on by the ADA holders through Samandao. So that's real exciting to see, even pre-governance, that governance is awakening. And I expect to see dozens, if not hundreds, of DREPs probably in the next 90 to 120 days. So you have a very diverse set of people whose only job is to think about the governance of Cardano as a whole.
Charles, hard question. And I don't know if you can answer this at the top of your head, because it requires, or there's a lot of factors and variables. Let's say we're using a scale of 1 to 10 for decentralization, right? And 10 may be impossible to have complete decentralization. I don't know. You're smarter than me on these things, but where would you say Cardano is on that scale? And then with the upcoming hard fork, where would that put you?
So we wrote a paper and then partnered with the University of Edinburgh to build an index called the EDI, the Edinburgh Decentralization Index. And that paper identified, and the EDI identifies 8 different areas that you can look at decentralization. And so you don't look at decentralization just from one lens, but you look at it from everything from who controls the consensus nodes to how many full nodes do you have inside the system, to who writes the software, to the tokenomics of the system, to particulars behind where security comes from. Is it proof of work or proof of stake based? And so each and every one of these things can either move you towards a state of more centralization or less centralization. It just depends on those facts and circumstances. So the goal of EDI is to come up with a number and basically tell you explicitly what is the aggregate of all those different activities together. Now, they've been working on it for about 2 years, and they've started measurements. And so if you go to the website of the Edinburgh Decentralization Index, you can actually see real time some of the measurements of Bitcoin and Ethereum and Cardano. So I think with the Chang hard fork, what this is going to do is set Cardano on a path within the next 6 to 12 months to become the most decentralized cryptocurrency project ever, including Bitcoin. Now, people have a gut feeling, oh, I disagree with that. Well, I don't care about your feelings. I care about facts and measurements. And, when we say it's the most decentralized as measured by the EDI, you can choose to agree or disagree with the EDI. And if you disagree, it's an open source academic metric by an academic institution. So then participate in versioning. The whole point of the EDI is to be version 1, 2, 3, 4, and each version tries to be more representative of what it attempts to measure, which is decentralization as a whole. So they've already begun pretty extensive conversations with regulators like the FCA, the ADGM over at Abu Dhabi, VARA in Dubai, the U.S. Department of Commerce, and others to kind of say, hey, you have this notion of sufficiently decentralized in your statutory viewpoint. Maybe, just maybe, we should begin discussing and measuring it. And actually, the paper for EDI was approved and is going to be submitted, is going to be presented at Financial Crypto. So it's already going through the peer review process as well. And there's been some phenomenal feedback. And that's already feeding into the discussion of whether EDI is an effective measurement or not. So my view is you have to start somewhere. And because the industry doesn't already have an accepted index of decentralization,
Right.
We kind of had to start from 101 and get that index bootstrapped. And now the next step is to apply that index in every dimension. And that is one of the design goals. When you look at protocols like Ouroboros Laos or the on-chain government system, they're not just being built from a position of efficiency and effectiveness or throughput, but they're also looking at, is decentralization preserved and protected? Because that's so sacred for these systems' long-term viability.
Yeah, I need to do my reading on that, but that's great that some sort of index and scale is being made here. I think it'd be really good for the industry to adopt a standard like that, and it can help, stop some FUD, because we know how we'll talk a bit about crypto media and things later, but we can use actual data and facts versus people just tweeting stuff.
Right.
Now
And by the way, we've been reaching out to a lot of blockchain projects on it. Like I just had a conversation with the Algorand folks and others, and there's a lot of excitement about these indexes existing because they suffer from the same problem that we suffer from, which is how do you